I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get the roll call, please?
Councilmember Boss.
He's absent and excused.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Present.
Councilmember Strobin.
Here.
Councilmember Cerveny. Here. Mayor Thornton.
Here. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. There are no requests for any items to be removed. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next are council staff reports and announcements. I just have a few things this evening I want to share with the council. First of all, I want to thank the Public Works Department for putting up all the Christmas decorations. I think the city looks great. Every year we try to make a few little improvements, and this year we added some lights to the light posts on the bridge coming into town, and I think they turned out pretty good. So I think the Public Works crew is doing a great job with that, and we really appreciate it. I won't say much about the Christmas Festival because we have the chairman from the Christmas Festival Committee here this evening, and I'm sure she'll share with the council and everybody what the plans are for this coming weekend. But it's going to be a pretty exciting weekend with a lot of good things happening. The other thing is the roundabout is on 4th and Pacific. We're city's starting to use that. Tony Cooper, our city engineer, is here this evening. He'll have a report on that. But Tony is bringing that project in for a landing. I just want to comment on the city engineer's efforts this year working on that project. He has done a phenomenal job. That's actually been a very challenging project. He's been with it from the beginning, and so yeah, he'll give us an update tonight, but Tony has done an absolutely phenomenal job getting that done for the city, and we appreciate all his efforts. Yeah, he's just an incredible guy.
Long hours.
Great job, Tony. And then just the last thing is I will be having my mayor's town hall on Wednesday, December 5th. It'll begin at 6:30, and it'll be at the Public Works Building. Everybody's invited to attend. It's an informal meeting, and we just get together and discuss pretty much whatever anybody wants to talk about. So hope to see a lot of people there. That's all I have for this evening. Mr. Cairns, our city attorney, is not going to be here this evening. He's excused. So we'll get right into the council member comments. Councilmember Stimmel.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Councilmember Williams.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. Hey, I did get to go around the roundabout just as it opened, as they were taking the signs down. And I said, hey, this thing's open. I went around, went both ways. It worked great. It worked really good. There was a few people that were a little confused. They thought they were in the UK driving the wrong way, but hopefully they'll see the drift of it and understand, too, the person in the roundabout has the right of way, not the person entering the roundabout like in France. So hopefully everybody will get a lot of use out of it. The decorations look nice. I agree with that. It's great. Public Works should be commended on the work, especially the ones on the bridge. I like those. Last night I went out, wow, this is cool. And I did thank you for taking me on a tour of the new building. It's going to be a great asset to the city, the TDS building, when it gets put into full utilization. I think that'll be great. There's going to be some community space in there, I think, as well. It's a big place in there. And get rid of some of these other little dinky things like this. Anyway, that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Strobin.
No comments tonight.
Okay, Councilmember Cerveny.
Well, December 1st approaches and the annual holiday bazaar, and it's always a great event for the schools and the different organizations. So make some time to go through and talk to people and thank them for what they do and donate where you can. It's kind of the major fundraiser, so go out there and mingle and have some Christmas spirit.
Is Walkenock this weekend or next?
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Walkenock this weekend, I forgot that. Yeah.
Full weekend,
Get the
yeah.
bags out.
Yeah. Great, thank you. So next we have staff reports, 2 staff reports this evening. First one is a finance report, and Dustin Bailey will be giving our staff report.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, citizens. You may have noticed that the staff report's a little bit longer than your typical monthly finance report. And the reason for that is because the end of the year approaching, I thought it was important to put a little bit more information out. First off, property taxes revenue through October 2018 for property taxes is $104,000 higher than previous year. Based on November's property tax receipts, the total of property tax revenues in 2018 will be close to budget. Sales tax are higher than anticipated in the budget, overall lower than 2017. Sales tax revenues are projected to exceed budget by over $40,000. And November sales tax revenue is 20% higher than October's. Utility excise tax continues to be a fluctuating, moving target for us. As you know, there was quite a bit higher revenue than anticipated, and I have to give credit to the finance staff for noticing that discrepancy. We received a commitment from Comcast that they'll be working to rectify the issue, do some refunds to subscribers, and then the city will have to do some recalculating also and refund Comcast accordingly. I have a table here that shows the gambling tax so far. You can see we continue to have some lower gambling tax revenues than previous years. The effective tax rate for the month of October being 6.8%, and then the total effective rate for the year 6.32%. The reserve fund interest income was a little over 37,000, was 37,736 through October 2018, and that's lower compared to October of 2017. Impact fee fund 2018 budget anticipated 40 new residences. Revenues through October 2018 show receipts of 35 permits, even though the total of 49 permits had been issued for new single-family homes in 2018. Many builders had deferred payment until completion. The non-expenditure category for school district impact fees, city collects the fees from developers and passes them through the county. Approximately $153,000 in expenses have been charged to the impact fund for the 4th and Pacific roundabout through October 2018. So total projected charges will be over $500,000. On the capital projects, real estate excise tax through the month of October was $151,951, and the projected year-end total is expected to be $28,000 higher than the budgeted amount. Sewer operating fund revenues through October 2018 were almost $1 million, or 85% of the annual budget. The 2018 revenues reflect the following 3 main categories, or main factors. A reduction in revenue due to the total ERUs compared to 2017, based on a review of water usage at the La Center card rooms. A reduction in revenue due to strong collections in 2017, thereby reducing the past due balances and increased finance charges for 2017. And revenues through October 2018 are $26,516 more for biosolids. Sewer operating fund personnel costs through 2018 were 86% of the annual budget, and were roughly $121,000 higher than October 2017 due to position vacancies. All transfers for the year had been made for 2018 included $200,000 payment to the general fund for debt incurred for from the 2006-2015 preliminary related to the purchase of the wastewater treatment plant. And then finally, revenues for the sewer debt fund through October 2018 reflect system development changes or charges on the 33 new single-family homes. The 2018 budget is based on 40 permits. And since there was only one sewer SDDC in October, there will be a revenue shortfall, which is currently $55,684. And that's all for my staff report. Are there any questions?
Real quick, Dustin,
Yes.
the reserve fund there, and I don't know if you have the answer to this right off the top of your head. It went down from 54 to 37,000. Was that just because the fund changed, or was there interest rate changes or something along those lines?
That would be the interest rate changes would be a major factor.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
you.
Next, we have a staff report from the city engineer, Tony Cooper.
Thanks, Mayor, City Council. So as you can see, the roundabout is open and to all direction of traffic, but there's still a few things that they have to do. One is the street lights. They just installed the last two street lights on the concrete barrier yesterday, and they just finished wiring everything. So all they're waiting on is for Clark Public Utilities to connect power, and they'll be able to turn the streetlights on. So it may be tomorrow, depends on when CP gets out there to do that. So that's still remaining. And there is, the contractor did install a power to the center of the roundabout. So there is a GFIC outlet inside one of the pole boxes, but it won't get power until CPU connects that. So there is a way to get power out there now. So the second thing is the concrete sidewalk along the concrete barrier that still needs to be poured. They're planning on doing that next week, weather permitting, so they'll have to close Life S Lane when they do that. They need to tear out some of the curb and gutter that was damaged because of a truck, and so they're going to repair that. But we are getting reimbursed from the trucking company because they did take responsibility for it, so they're going to pay for that part of it. Let's see, there is a little bit of finish work to do on some of the landscaping, and there is a little bit of paving to do for matching into 4th Street on the west side. When they built the roundabout, they had to cut into the 4th Street. So there is some paving to do, and most of that will be done next week. Well, like I said, they're going to tear up some of the curb and gutter, and they have to install some rock behind the concrete barrier as well. There's striping that has to be done. There's thermoplastic crosswalk striping and some of the approach striping, and then not all of the signs are in. As you can see, there's a yield sign up that our guys placed there temporary. So there's some signs that still have to be installed. And again, that's going to be within the next week, so they should be finishing all that. Once that's done, we'll do a final punch list, and then WashDOT actually wants to do an inspection since they provided some of the funding for that. They'll want to do a final inspection also. So once all that's done, the city will accept the project, and then it'll be open. And I think what we're going to do is do a press release, some kind of press release once it's completed to send out to everybody to let them know that it is finished. Are there any questions?
I have a couple for you, Tony.
Yeah.
On the slip lane coming this way, when you come off the concrete onto the asphalt, there's a pretty severe dip in there. Is that for drainage, or is
You're talking about out on the crosswalks themselves?
coming on when you come off concrete onto asphalt,
Yeah.
coming this way? There's a pretty good dip in there. Is that a drainage dip?
You know, the dip appearance is the crosswalk itself, because those are all 2% because ADA
Yeah, I
requirements.
understand
But
that.
as you come up, they tie into the asphalt. There shouldn't be any dips. I'm not sure exactly where you're.
It's just if I come through the slip lane, if I come
Yeah.
across the bridge and come up the slip lane to come this way, there's a sharp edge in there someplace. And I think it's when you come off the concrete. I looked at it, looks like there might be a drain there, and it may be slanted in for that drain. And with the-
There is some slope on the pavement itself.
It's on the
For
pavement.
drainage, yeah. So that could be it. I'll have to look and see exactly where you're talking about.
Okay.
But the dips itself are basically the transitions for the handicap ramp and then to the
Sure,
asphalt.
and I
So-
understand the 2% on that.
Yeah.
The other part was you said there was truck damage, and the trucking company took responsibility for it. Was it negligence on the trucking company? Were they have low-hanging equipment, or what happened?
Well, I think it was what the contractor told me. I wasn't out there when it actually happened, but I think it was a wide load and it was really low. So that as you're taking the bypass lane, there's curb and gutter there. This is completely torn out, about 10 or 15 feet. And so I think what happened was he was too close to the edge of the curb, and his load was too low, and so it just scraped it, just took it right out. That was during the detour. So
Oh, okay.
again, traffic was trying to keep not encroach in the center because it was a two-way traffic. So what we are doing is we're developing some signs, and I've been working with DKS, our traffic consultant, for advanced truck signs to tell trucks the low boys, the really long loads, to take the bypass lane and take an alternate way to go north, rather than try to take the roundabout turn, because they really can't maneuver that. The really long loads can't maneuver it very well. So we're coming up with some advanced truck signs to get them to take a little detour for the maneuvers that they can't make.
Okay,
So
thank you.
this is the works right now.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No, it looks nice. The curbs I noticed are a little short, so I'm waiting to see the first person that kind of goes through there a little bit fast and goes up and over them.
Yeah, you're talking about yeah.
Have you tried it already?
I came close. I'll have to admit, I came close.
Yeah, those curbs are mountable, so yeah, somebody could drive over it. Yeah, that's kind of the logic of it, just to get trucks a little bit wider berth to turn.
Yeah, it looks good, Tony.
Yeah, it
Do
looks
we have
nice.
to repost speed?
Okay, thank you very
Thanks
much.
so
Tony.
much,
Great
Tony.
job, appreciate it. Next on the agenda, we have a public hearing and ordinance 2018-17, adopting the budget for the city. Oh, I'm sorry, I passed up. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is citizen public comment. I don't know why I miss that all the time, but anyway, if anybody would like to address the council, please step up to the podium and state your name and address, and if you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Now is the time to do it. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Jim Irish, 1653 East Heritage Loop, the Center, Washington. Tony, that drop-off that he's talking about is equal with the doorway going into the last frontier. It's where the concrete from the roundabout dips down into the pavement, and there is a severe drop-off. It thumps you as you go through there. You might,
Okay.
I didn't look at it, but you may take a look at it, because I saw a couple of people really swerve back and forth as they came off.
Yeah.
Just a caution,
Yeah.
take a look at it. The other thing on the detours, I was talking with a trucker, and in the last frontier, and he said that if they were to come up the slip lane and turn and go up Aspen, even to have to go back onto Fifth to go up north on Pacific Highway, it'd be a lot easier for them to go up to 10th.
That's
And
the
out
route
that
that
way.
we're going to detour.
Very
Yes.
much easier
Yeah.
for them. And of course, southbound on Pacific Highway, they do great. They just slip right down to there. For thoughts. The other thing I do want to mention is the Walk and Knock is Saturday. Please, we all have a lot more to be thankful for than a lot of people in the city of La Center and in the immediate area that do not. either through money to buy enough groceries for their family and to keep them going. And so we, the Lions and this community and this health and food bank really needs your help in being able to support those that have less than we have. And so I'd appreciate it if you would remember to put out something, even if it's just a bag of Wheaties or something, for the walk and knock. It would really be great. And then again, this year the Lions are doing food baskets for those that are in need, that have submitted their names or can submit their names. And so if you know somebody that's really struggling, to get in contact with the Lions, Jason Rivers or Wendy Cord, and pass on their name, and so that we can look at it to see whether or not the Lions can help them. But most importantly, Tony, I want to thank you. You worked very hard with me to get the TIB money when we for the funding of the roundabout, with the exception of that hidden sewer underline, that underground, all that we had to do. It wasn't covered. But you did an awesome job. The engineering on that has been fantastic. And since the very beginning when we first applied for the grant and proceeded to get it. So anyway, I want to thank you for an awesome job. You did a great, dang good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Melinda Masna, and I'm at 5305 Northeast 384th Street, La Center. And I'm just here to let everybody know about the Christmas Festival this weekend and all the other events. We have the bazaar. Well, actually, Santa House calls on Friday night. And so we'll go out and we'll, Santa's going to visit the little kids that signed up. The parents signed them up to see Santa at the fire truck, and people will be giving their donations of coats and toys and food towards La Center families.
How many
And
households have people
We
signed
got
up?
46 this year.
Wow,
So
awesome.
that was the highest that we've gotten all along. So we're going to have a busy night.
It's gonna be busy.
Yeah.
For
It's
sure.
So
it's
I
a
just
pretty
wanna-
neat experience.
Huh?
It's a pretty neat experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that doesn't count
really
like the families that like in the neighborhood, they just have one person sign up and then all the neighbors come out.
Oh, okay.
So then it takes a little bit longer. So
That's me.
kind of run behind. But yeah, the gifts and such are going to go towards La Center families this year. And so we wanted to give back to our very own community. So that worked out. And then Saturday, of course, is the La Center Bazaar, and that's going to be up at the high school from 9 a.m. till 3 p.m. And we're going to have lots of homemade goodies and crafts and arts, and the Boy Scouts will be there, and, you know, Christmas trees you can raffle and all kinds of stuff. So our high school band and choir, and actually the middle school as well, will be performing there. I think they start at noon. I'm not sure exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah, so if you want to come watch them. And then Sunday evening, 5 to 8:30, or 5:30 till 8, we will be doing the Christmas festival, Christmas tree lighting. We'll have a nativity scene, some animals such as Curly the camel, and the high school brass ensemble, and then the actual the what do they call it, the advanced choir, or
I think so,
I'm
yeah.
trying to think of, yeah. So they'll be performing, and we'll have some activities there for that night, and Santa, of course. So hopefully I'm not forgetting anything, but I do want to say thank you to Public Works for decorating, and for all the people who have donated, who have volunteered to help out, for all the performances that are going to be there. Everybody who's helped, it's just been really amazing, everybody coming together and working together. So,
Clark County Fire Rescue.
yes,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually the first time I was going to say, and then I don't like to speak. Anyways, thank you, everybody. All right.
Thank you, Melinda.
If somebody wants to help, who would they contact if you need help?
Me. I guess.
And Melinda is the chairperson for the Christmas Festival, so if you need a
Yeah,
number, I'd be
if-
happy to give it to you.
Which
You
actually
can-
your wife has already contacted.
Oh, she did, okay.
Yes. Yes.
So
I know.
Trying to help.
Yes. I'm excited for her help.
so thank you. Yeah, great job, Melinda. It's put a lot of time and hard work into this, and yeah, it's going to be an exciting evening, exciting weekend, but I'm looking forward to the Christmas Festival, and we'll have the laser show again this year. And
Did I say there was a Christmas tree lighting?
so,
Yes, you already got in there.
okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes, I did say that. I know I said
So any other citizens want to address the council this evening? Okay, seeing nobody stepping up to the podium, we'll move on. So, yeah, this evening, we do have a couple of ordinances. The first one will be a public hearing and an ordinance for 2018-17, adopting the budget for the city of La Center for fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019, and Mr. Paul Lewis will be presenting for the city.
Thank you, Mayor. The staff report. As you mentioned, ordinance 2018-17 presents your 2019 budget for adoption. It represents the culmination of about 8 months' worth of work by your Budget Advisory Committee and a bunch of work by city staff as well. Just to hit a couple of the highlights, we've had now, I think, 2 work sessions. We had a work session earlier today on the budget. We had a work session earlier on the preliminary budget, and then a work session tonight on the final budget. Had 7 meetings of the Budget Advisory Committee, and those began in April of this year, so engaged them a little bit earlier and in more depth. Several months where we had 2 meetings in a month. And then at your last meeting in earlier November, you had a public hearing on revenue sources included in the budget, and there was more detailed information on different revenue sources, and you adopted your property tax for 2019 as well. And that was a 1% increase. Once we've produced the budget, we're required to publish a notice in the newspaper for 2 consecutive weeks. That was done, advertising that the preliminary budget is available for the public to review, and that there will be a public hearing for your consideration on it. And that was, again, published for public hearing for tonight. To summarize the budget, the general fund budget is just over $3.7 million. The sewer operating fund budget is $1,160,000. The total budget, including all of the operating funds and capital funds, comes in at just under $7.4 million. I think as you've been aware, and as we've been working on over the last couple of years, since 2016, the tax revenue primarily attributed to the card room tax revenues declined more than $1.6 million, or 41%. And as a result, your 2019 general fund budget relies on reserves. There's a $428,000 deficit, and uses a portion of your over $6 million in reserve and general fund reserves to cover that deficit. That deficit is smaller than the 2018 forecasted deficit, and even after that $428,000, your reserves exceed your reserve policy targets by about 30%. Just want to hit a couple of the highlights of the 2019 budget. The mayor has spent some time working on the staffing allocations, and the budget represents the streamlining that has been implemented in 2018. Net reduction of 1 full-time position in 2018, but also some additional changes as well that'll improve operations. For the 5th straight year, there'll be no increase in the monthly sewer rates, which is not typical for small providers. There's lots of fixed costs associated with operating a utility, and so for a small city operation, even though your rates are at the high end of the local community. You're comparing yourself to jurisdictions like the City of Vancouver or Clark Regional Wastewater that have a much larger customer base and are able to defer those, take advantage of those economies of scale. So those delays in increasing sewer rates can't last forever, though, and just a little heads up that at some point those cost increases will require some rate increases as well. Actions included in the budget include strengthening community development. The new community development manager is slated, I think the recruitment's going on now.
Correct.
So they'll be on board full-time in 2019, and there's some additional money in there for economic development that I'll touch on in a minute. But at the I-5 junction and at the Timmins Road interchange. Targeted infrastructure investments, so there's capital money allocated for a couple of important projects. The Holly Park Community Center playground and tennis court will all see some improvements in 2019. There's field drainage improvements that are grant dependent, so there's some grant money being pursued to support that project. In addition, grants are being applied for to fund Heritage Park and Trail, and then the Breeze Creek Trail, including both land acquisition and development. And then another project that's not grant dependent is improvement to Stone Creek Drive pavement reconstruction. I know Tony's been trying to pursue grants for that project over the last couple of years and hasn't been successful, and that project can be paid for with real estate excise tax, and so the proposal is to use that money to improve Stone Creek Drive. And then, as you approved at your last meeting, you'll be transitioning to a new city hall if you are able to close on the purchase of the TDS building later this month, or actually in December, later this year. And that should provide both efficiencies in terms of staffing and service provision, but also better customer service from being able to operate out of one building. We have provided some funding in here to help you with that transition, both in terms of space planning and move costs as well, and to the extent that there's any additional maintenance needed before you move in. And then, as I mentioned before, economic development, there's more detailed plans for the commercial and mixed-use development at I-5 and Timmins Road. There's some money in there for some additional studies or plans to, I think, a sub-area plan for Timmins Road, and then additional efforts at the I-5 junction. So this does require a public hearing, so staff's recommendation is that, subject to the public hearing, council adopt the ordinance.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lewis or discussion with the council before I open up the public hearing?
Actually, Mayor, if I can, sorry, I meant to do this for the public hearing, pull it out of the document.
Yeah.
So the preliminary budget, the preliminary budget that was published includes a budget message from the mayor with some of the points that I had just reviewed, and then includes more detailed information on revenues and expenses. All this information has been reviewed with council in work sessions, staffing levels, and then more detailed information on general fund revenues, and then more information on the expenses at each of the departments at the summary level to salaries, benefits, supplies, services, intergovernmental, and capital. So the total general fund budget, you can see here, is $3.7 million, and you can see the breakdown both at the department level as well as by the category. Expenses for your sewer operating fund as well. And then the capital projects, as I mentioned. And then more detailed information on your budget. The city staff will be producing a budget document with more detail than even this included. And your actual budget ordinance adopts the budget at the summary fund level. And so these are the expenditure categories, and the revenues are provided primarily for reference, and your budget adoption is really this total expenditure line for all the various funds, the 7.36 million. All right, just wanted to
Thank you.
go through a little bit more.
And that is available on the city website as well, so if anybody would like to review that in detail, those documents are all on the city website. Correct, Dustin?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so at 7:12, I'll open up the public hearing. If anybody would like to address the council and comment on the 2019 budget, please step up to the podium and state your name and address, and if you limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Jim Irish, 1653 East Heritage Loop in Center, Washington. First off, I want to thank the Budget Advisory Committee and the mayor and Paul Lewis for an excellent job in presenting this in a written format that it was easy to follow. You didn't have to have a calculator, but and I think you did a good job. And Paul, I know a lot of your English was in there, and you have a good spin and a good job doing it. I have two questions, though. Number one is, if the closure on the TDS building will come in December, then are we going to have, and this budget is passed, are we going to have an amendment to the 2019 budget to cover the cost of the expenditure for buying the building? Since it will be done in this year, and the cost will be paid in next year. I know it's not open for discussion, but I mean, that's a question I have.
If you want to ask your other question, then Paul answer them both, yeah.
Okay. And the other question is, or not question, but a comment is, I noticed that we have a lot in here as far as the staffing, and you did a really good job on that, as far as keeping that, but we can't keep cutting staff. We cut budgets down to bare minimums in a lot of cases. We need to actively look at pursuing going out to the junction or going in here and getting income coming in, tax revenues coming in. I know you touched upon that, Mayor, but we need to actively, council, you need to actively get involved in doing that because we can't afford to cut anymore. If we keep cutting staff, we keep cutting money that needs to come down, then we're going to end up behind the 8 ball and even bigger behind the 8 ball. We need to work with the new community development director. We got a sewer out there, we got expansion, and we got good planning from the planning commission out there. We need to go forward, be actively pursuing. Ridgefield is going to be taking away a lot of possibilities that we may have. So we need to get on your tennis shoes, as I told Eric Eisman, get on your tennis shoes because you ain't got time to sit down. And that's all, Paul, on that question on the.
So actually, the next ordinance is an adjustment to, an amendment to the 2018 budget. The building will close before the end of the year.
Oh, okay. So it'd be covered into the amendment to the 18 budget. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Larry Luton, 1109 West C Avenue, La Center, Mayor, Council, and members of the public. This just came out today, and it's kind of nice. It's like everything that comes from here is in Latin, and this is in English, so it's kind of nice to be able to understand it. Two things did jump out to me. There's one statement in here about the Center City Council voted in January to create a sliding scale tax rate for gambling revenues, offering a reprieve for businesses affected by the opening of the new casino in 2017. That, my friends, is the only time the word business is used in this whole thing. We're forgetting about businesses in this town. And then we move down to here, and regarding plans to diversify revenues, Mr. Bailey pointed to Mayor Greg Thornton's budget message, which noted plans to push commercial and mixed-use development at Interstate 5 Junction and Timmon and La Center Roads intersection. What about downtown? Are we just going to ignore this down here and walk away? You're buying a building, and that's now off the tax roll. And I don't know what we're going to do. Are we going to sell the other buildings and put them back on the tax roll? And I walked in here tonight and I heard about this deficit that I didn't know. And at the same time, we spent $900,000 on a new building that we really need. I commend Mr. Strobin tonight. He brought up some interesting facts, and I just, this is scaring me, folks, and it just reminds me when I was a little kid, my dad used to say over and over, you can't have champagne taste on a beer budget. So we got to work it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Al Fellow, 152 West 15th Street. Again, we've got a serious problem here. We're dipping into the reserve every year, was brought up earlier. $400,000, that's just a little bit. And that's again the people who are in the city, most of them are ignorant about what's going on. They don't realize what a problem we've had the last several years. And, like it was stated just recently about the sewer bill, it hasn't been raised in 5 years. Nobody wants to see an increase in the sewer bill, but it's quite obvious that there hasn't been one in 5 years, that right there you can get, X amount of bucks. Is it going to be popular? No. But that's you guys are saying. Balance the budget. I'm a fiscal conservative. Told you guys that many a time. And we've got to look hard and strong at balancing the budget and staying out of the reserves. Now, how we do that, again, that's you guys' responsibility. Elected officials, are supposed to be looking out for the city of La Center and the citizens. The citizens are, fat, dumb, and happy, because we had all these revenues from the card rooms for years and years. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
Okay, any other comments? Seeing nobody stepping up to the podium at 7:20, I'll close the public hearing and turn it back over to the council for further discussion. Questions for Mr. Lewis?
I think I made my point pretty clear in our study or the session before. I think there are always a way to cut costs, and they're not always popular. And that's a lot of money. I mean, $428,000, looking at the 557 for this year, so you're talking about $1 million out of the reserve fund by the end of 2019, and that's pretty scary to me. I understand that we've got a nice substantial sum of money in there, but it goes quickly, especially when we're dropping money like this. And to turn that around in such a short time, I just don't see it possible. I don't see a development getting in there and getting a tax base from it at the junction within a year. It's, there's permits and studies to make sure for environmental impacts there, and then they can start breaking ground. So, at this point in time, I probably would have, go against the budget.
Very good. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Well, I'm happy to see a couple targeted infrastructure investments. I think these investments are important. Of course, I've got little kids, so I'm thinking about things for little kids, but that's what makes this place an attractive place to live. It'd be nice if we could cut everything. I was mad when they cut the fireworks. That was my favorite part of the whole year. But I think they did a great job of bringing something else that was really cool. I feel like we're working together, coming together. I'm not sure how we're going to fix it overnight either. But we've established a level of service in this city that I think, outshines neighboring cities. People want to move here. I think we will attract business. I think we will attract people. I'm not quite sure how to fix it. But these are high bang for the buck projects. I mean, shade in the park. If you've ever had a birthday party down there and tried to hand out ice cream or something, it gets hot in August. The baseball field in the spring, soccer field in the fall is a mess. Hopefully we can get some dollars to help match that. I think there's some good things in here. I'd hate to see us just cut everything and reduce our level of service to the point where our budget looks great, but our roads look like crap. And I've said this before, I used to live right off of, is it Parkway, Battleground? This is a beautiful place to live. I don't think we should reduce our level of service. We just need to dig deep, find a way to make this balance. And I feel like the Budget Advisory Committee worked hard. It is, after all, an estimate. And often, it doesn't end up being as bad as we think. I think we're kind of conservative in a lot of our estimates. So hopefully it's not as bad as it might appear on paper. Hopefully.
I just think that, as a resident here, it's kind of a responsibility of yourselves to take care of your house and such. And so when you have deficits, you make those cuts, you make those sacrifices. And if the residents understand that there are a budget deficit here and there's going to be one the following year and they're going to be big numbers, that they'll understand, hey, there's no sunshade for this year. You know what? We'll bring our own down to the water park or whatever to hand out ice cream to stay out of the sun. Stuff like that. People understand that. I mean, I don't know how many hard times people here have had, but I've been through some hard times. And you make those sacrifices. And you know what? We still come out on top. We come out smiling. It makes you stronger until you can find some sort of resolution to the issue.
I think, and Larry hit on it, the development of the junction areas, we need more revenue. I realize you're new to this. We've cut a lot of stuff, and we've cut staff pretty significantly. I mean, I don't see a whole lot more cuts unless we start reducing service. Part of what, and what John said down here, it's a nice place. La Center's a beautiful place. That's why we live here. And these services hold up the value of our property. We start cutting services, the road looks like crap, or the park has weeds in it, that's going to start lowering our value of our homes and our value of our town. Our whole value is going to go down. So we have to keep those services. I agree with this deficit, trust me. I don't like it either. And it is a problem we have. We can't print more money. That's the problem. That's what we need. And we've lost a revenue from our card rooms, which was helping. So the next direction we can go is development of the areas. And it's not going to happen for a couple of years. We aren't going to see it. I mean, if they started nosing around tomorrow with all the stuff that has to be done, it's still going to be at least 2 years before we see any money out of there. We're going to have to keep floating these loans to some extent until we can turn this ship around. Or we significantly cut services, and then that's going to make the town suffer.
But aren't we in a lawsuit, or there's a lawsuit going on, so we really can't do anything in the junction until that's done and settled? I may be misunderstanding that.
There's a portion of the available land at the junction that's being litigated as a result of the last urban growth area expansion 3 years ago now. And so there is a ongoing lawsuit. It's for 52 acres of the 156 acres that are available at the junction. And yeah, that is an issue that, a hurdle that we have to overcome before we see development on those particular parcels. And yeah, so there are still some real challenges at the junction that we're going to continue to have to deal with going forward. And you're right, Tom, it's not going to happen overnight. So even if a developer came forward tomorrow and said that they're going to look at doing projects at the junction, it's going to be years before that really gets developed out. And so it's a concerning situation that the city is in, and we have identified 2019 with a budget deficit. I think the city is worked very diligently this year to address the expenditure side of our budget, as well as trying to come up with new revenue sources, as we talked about in our work session earlier. One study that the city's going through right now is to look at the feasibility of having a stormwater utility. And if the city's successful with establishing that stormwater utility, it could generate as much as another $100,000 in revenue next year, which could be applied towards the budget deficit. We'll continue to look at ways to cut expenditures as we go through next year. Like I say, I know the staff has worked very diligently with the assistance of Mr. Lewis, and now we have finance manager working with us. Dustin's just getting his feet on the ground here, and we'll continue to look at all these expenditures. And the council will continue to look at ways to look at other revenue streams. So we do definitely have a problem. We have that deficit, and projected out the next 3-4 years, it really continues to grow. But again, as we address it, next year, that's going to eliminate the deficit for future years as well. It's not cumulative, so it looks pretty bleak when you project that out for 3 or 4 years. But I do think as the city continues to grow, and we do have additional revenue sources, and we can keep addressing the, looking at the expenses. But it's just, inflation is working against the city as well. And when you have 75% of your budget for salary and benefits, and your COLAs, cost of living adjustments, and increased benefits go up a fixed percentage every year, and that gets added to your budget, again, if we don't have revenue to replace just those fixed costs, it's going to be more and more challenging going forward.
Were those increases actually included in here for
Yes,
salaries and stuff?
absolutely,
Because it is 70% or
Yep,
75%? Yeah. Okay.
So, the city raised, for instance, the property tax this year, 1%. I think that increased our property tax $4,000 for the entire city. So that's such an insignificant little amount of money compared to what the 3 or 4% increase in COLAs will be for our overall salaries and benefits. We look at it very hard. We're working on it diligently. I think the city will continue to improve on this, but again, we're at a point where we have to pass a budget before the end of the year. We've done, I think the staff and the city's done a great job addressing those issues, and we'll continue to address them going forward. And again, it's, even with the revenues from the card rooms, it's still in a state of flux. We are still trying to find out what this new normal is going to be, and hopefully they will continue to do as well as they're doing, and maybe even better. So it's a little bit later here in the meeting tonight, we'll be looking at the tax structure for the card rooms. But again, that's something that we're going to have to continue to look at. It's dynamic, it's changing, and we just have to. It's going to be challenging for the next couple of years. There's no doubt.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's something to what John was saying, like those sunshades and stuff like that. Just real quick, with a community as strong as La Center, if citizens are really wanting some of this stuff, there's other ways to achieve that. There's different type of drives, car washes, if that you can get people involved with to raise that type of money, instead of tying it into the city's budget. That's all I have to say.
I have a question for Paul, real quick. Would the creation of the stormwater utility tax essentially look like an increase to the monthly sewer rates or the bill? So where exactly would that show up, and what would it look like to a resident?
So I can just give you some comparisons of other cities, what they do, and it does show up on the utility bill. So it's I think Ridgefield, Battleground, it's in that $8 to $9 a month for a typical single-family residence. It's also applied to commercial properties as well as other public entities as well. It's based typically on impervious surface, so the amount of drainage that you generate. But the single-family household, essentially equivalent residential unit concept applies to the stormwater, and it would, again, typically in the $8 to $10 a month. The county's rate, I think, is a little over $3 a month for the urban unincorporated area, but most cities are, again, I think as high as $12 or $13 a month. And it would typically show up on the utility bill.
What will it end up being, to yield 100,000, what would be
I
the
think I
approach?
used it like an $8, so you've got 3,000 residents and so
1,000 houses.
So we want to add a stormwater thing and then also raise sewer bills too? I mean,
Sewer eventually we need it. You said it would hit on the utility bill, because in LA County, I think it hits on the property tax bill.
it would be on the city's utility bill.
Thank you.
Budgets are hard, whether they're our personal budgets or whether they're city budgets. And each year, I think we struggle with the whole process, understanding it. There are so many different layers at the city level and the state level and municipal impacts that come in that are very difficult to understand. And I think we have an outstanding community group of individuals, as Paul referenced earlier, on the budget committee that's worked very diligently. Larry, you've sat in on some of those meetings. Everyone comes to the table with ideas, and just as you mentioned, Tom, a lot of pointed questions to department heads about how can we cut more, how can we manage more efficiently and effectively. Everyone sits there at the table and squirms. But it's a thought process that makes everybody, at all the staffing levels, look at things a little differently in terms of how can we manage the city in a better fashion for the taxpayers and for our own sense of pride in how we do our work on a daily basis. And I think that's what makes us La Center, and always has made us La Center. We look at things differently, and like you mentioned, just because the dollar amounts are up here for budgeted items doesn't stop us from going out there and raising funds in different fashions to do a shade covering in the community park. That's how the original park got started. Was the community came together, put up lights for the fields, and made it happen. And that's how the new stadium happened. So there's nothing in this community that cannot occur if we put our minds together and make it happen with a lot of grassroots effort. So just because we put together a bunch of numbers that are very large numbers on a document that we sit here and assess and criticize and squirm about and feel, have a lot of Tums moments over year after year, it doesn't mean that we're not trying to make it better or that we're cutting things just because we don't like someone or something that happens in the community. Historically, this has happened year after year after year. And it took us a number of years to get that reserve fund to an amount that is useful for the community. It's part of what's helped us succeed in the good years as well as the bad years. And now we're really up against the wall where that reserve fund was planned to be used for situations like this where we knew the revenues that we were riding the coattails of wasn't always going to be there. It historically, worked its way out of Vancouver, the city of Vancouver, and the city of Woodland. Historically, all of the card rooms have had good years and bad years, a run of good times and bad times, and we knew that that wasn't going to happen forever, and we needed to plan better. Timing never works as we have it outlined. For economic development to come to town. We've worked with businesses for years, Larry, to try to get them to come to the table and talk about urban redevelopment and building up and bringing more types of businesses to town. And unfortunately, I love our businesses to death, but they're not willing to listen yet. And people have to get to a stage in their own business and in their own lives where they'll listen to those ideas, be accepting of it, and work with the city to try to develop the downtown core. You know, there's been at least 4 or 5 mayors and city council that have tried to get that to happen, and it hasn't been successful. And that's not to say it's the business owners, but it is a matter of timing. And so who's to say that isn't going to happen when other things, fringe development starts occurring? But everything all happens in a timing fashion. And I think patience is always the hardest part in the human makeup to deal with. You know, how do we look at this and still pass a budget because we're required to by law? But then also know that as we go through the year, we're going to be making constant adjustments to that, and we won't always necessarily spend everything line by line, nor will we, there will be also times that we have to make adjustments because we're overspending in another one. And this is going to be another critical year for us to monitor that on a regular basis, and we've already talked about that in the budget committee, to have more regular meetings throughout the year. And each year that seems to ramp up. And I know I'm rambling here, but just to give you a bigger picture of what goes on behind the scenes and through the whole year's planning, that's why the budget piece is so hard. When we come to the table and try to make decisions, it's not because we haven't thought about it or that we want to make even more severe cuts than we have to, but we do have to kind of find some balance as we enter each year. So that we can go forward and see how we can make greater efficiencies internally and save more money as we go through the year, and educate all of the staff on how we look at that every time we need to order something or something breaks down. And then come full circle to another years of planning. And that's where we're at right now. So I hope that helps our new council members know, and even some of our new attendees know what all goes in behind the scenes. It's not any one particular mayor's agenda. It's a group effort. Even though the mayor gets to put that wonderful glowing letter on the front of it, it's not necessarily that individual's work alone. And, we've all been in that seat. You can't take all of the praise because, we either ended up a year under budget or be beaten up black and blue because we ended up over budget either. So it's a hard thing to really evaluate, and I understand the pain that you're feeling because we all come in, to that first year, sometimes even the first 2 or 3 years, depending on how big the dips are. But, that's just kind of a sense of what all goes into it, because it's a collective effort by the staff and everyone involved, the city members that sit on the committee, as well as Randy and I. So it isn't an easy one to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well said. So, So this is where we are for this year, looking into next year. And yes, the budget right now is forecasted to have a $428,000 deficit, but I can guarantee you the city is going to continue to address that issue. Any other comments or input?
Mayor, I move to approve ordinance 2018-17, adopting the budget for the city of La Center for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019, and a policy of fund balancing with regard to fund transfers.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 2018-17, adopting the budget for the city of La Center for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019, and a policy of fund balancing with regards to fund transfers. It's an ordinance, so could I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Stimmel?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams? Williams,
Yes.
Councilmember Strobin,
No.
Councilmember Cerveny,
Yes.
Thank you, Council. The ordinance passes 3-1. So, thank you, Council. With that, we'll move on. Next, we have another public hearing. It's ordinance 2018-18. It's the 2018 budget amendment. And again, Mr. Paul Lewis will be presenting.
Thank you, Mayor. Each year, the city monitors the budget after it's been adopted, and state law requires the city to only expend an amount up to the maximum amount that you've adopted in your budget. And typically, well, actually not for you, I think it's probably rarely, but every so often, probably not every year, but more frequently than not, you're required to make budget adjustments at the end of the year, and those typically fall into three categories, either corrections or administrative updates to the adopted budget, so there may be some things that didn't get exactly right given the planning horizon, or activities and expenditures associated with new revenues or new programs that you've established. 2019, the stormwater utility would fit that example if you decide to go forward with that. And then new funds, new items funded with unobligated and undesignated funds. So these are just net new things that you've decided to commit reserves to without any new revenues. So we monitor the budget, look at the appropriations at the fund level, and then, if needed, come to you at the prior to the end of the year with budget adjustments. And this year, there are a number of budget adjustments that are being proposed. The total budget adjustment is just under 1.5 million, 1.465 million. And just a quick summary of what those include. The general fund, it's $100,000. These are related to higher personnel costs, vacation time being cashed out, which is difficult to forecast, costs associated with personnel turnover. Also had higher professional services costs associated with the Growth Management Hearings Board litigation, as well as other support for the Latecomer Agreement and Human Resources Finance and Community Development. Part of that is due to development activity being roughly 30 to 40% higher than it was budgeted for as well. Sewer Operations Fund, this is just to give you a little bit more of a cushion in terms of your budget, a $25,000 increase. Personnel costs primarily being the driver here, and other costs associated with personnel turnover. Impact Fee Fund, I think as Dustin mentioned in his staff report, we're having additional costs associated with the roundabout hitting directly to the Impact Fee Fund. We need to provide an appropriation to cover that expense. Capital Projects Fund, so this is where the acquisition costs for the TDS office building at $935,000, plus we've had other sort of inspection costs and other costs associated with making sure that the building was suitable for purchase. And then lastly, Vehicle Equipment Replacement Fund, $65,000. During the year, an opportunity came forward to purchase 2 patrol vehicles as opposed to 1. We did have revenue from the sale of a surplus vehicle to the city of Battleground for $30,000 to cover part of the $65,000 additional expense to both purchase that vehicle, but also do the upfit that's required for a patrol vehicle as well. So a total of $1,465,000. The bulk of these, the funding for a bulk of these will come from higher than anticipated revenues and undesignated reserves or fund balance. There is a public hearing required for this, and staff recommends that, subject to the public hearing, that you adopt the ordinance. Quickly get to the summary here. So here's a summary worksheet showing the amounts by fund. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, any discussion with council before I open up the public hearing? Okay, at 7:45, I'll open up the public hearing. If anybody would like to address the council on this amendment, please step up to the podium and give us your name and address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Okay, seeing nobody stepping up to the podium, I'll close the public hearing and turn it back over to the council for comments. Any questions for Mr. Lewis?
I've got, Paul, on the second sheet, read by the recommendation, says funding for additional expenses will come from higher than anticipated revenues and available undesignated reserve fund balances. What is covered and what isn't?
So, I don't have
In other words,
the,
what's coming out of reserves?
I don't have the specific details for you, but the impact fees, capital projects revenues, both came in higher than anticipated. So in those two accounts, primarily related to development activity and real estate excise tax revenue coming in. So those are covering a portion of it, but most of the expenditures, as I mentioned, I think are related to primarily just to operating expenses being higher than anticipated, except for those ones in the capital side. So the vehicle equipment fund, that's coming out of reserves, but those are reserves that you set aside for replacement. So effectively on that one, you're bringing forward an expense that's planned to replace a vehicle in future years. But most of the general fund, the 100,000, likely will be primarily reserves.
And the capital fund had the money for the building.
Correct. Capital fund has sufficient reserves for the building to purchase the building.
And then, for the audience, in high-level numbers, the replacement cost for that, we paid $935, plus we're going to do some maintenance. What was the broker's estimate of what it would cost us to do that building?
The assessed value is a little over $1.4 million, and the broker's opinion of value is a little over $1.5 million.
You're talking about what we allocated for repairs, for maintenance?
Versus a new building.
250 per square foot.
Yeah, 250 per square foot, so we've been up, plus the land.
Right.
Yeah, so
I thought it was like 2.8 million or something to build a new one from scratch or something.
Plus the land, yeah. So the money was in the general fund, or in the general fund for future building. This'll, and then
Capital
ideally,
projects
the hope is to surplus these buildings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions, comments?
Mayor, I'll move to approve ordinance 2018-18, amending adopted budget for the city of La Center, Washington, for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2018.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 2018-18, amending the adopted budget for the city of La Center for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2018. Again, it's an ordinance, if I get a roll call.
Councilmember Stimmel?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Councilmember Strobin?
Yes.
Councilmember Servany?
Yes.
The ordinance is approved. Thank you, council. Oops. So we have one more item on the agenda this evening under new business. It's the 2019 alternative tax agreements with MTM Gaming, Inc., Last Frontier, and The Palace. Mr. Lewis will be presenting.
Thank you, Mayor. In January of this year, you adopted two changes. One, a revision to your municipal code that guides you for the gambling tax on the card rooms. And then that change allowed you to enter into annual taxpayer agreements with specific card room owners. You approved both of those items in January of 2018. Since your ordinance currently allows for these annual agreements, this action would put in place the annual agreement for 2019. The proposal is to provide essentially the same tax structure that you had for 2018 and continue that into 2019. Just a quick rundown of the purpose of the agreement that you entered into in 2018. Again, I think the continued economic viability of the gambling tax, the card rooms, not only the support that it provides to the community in terms of jobs, but also represents a significant source of your revenue. In the past, that's been as much as 79% of your total revenue. This last year, and in your adopted budget, it's in the 37% of your total revenue, 37 and 39. But $1.3 million is the reduced estimate. It's been as high as over $3 million. But still, even at the reduced level, it represents 50% of your tax revenue from the card rooms. The card rooms, again, your response to the card room situation, this proposed agreement was in response to the situation that the card rooms found themselves in roughly 18 months ago with the LNA casino opening. And combination of things happened with the card rooms. One, the casino opening provided competition for their revenue side, but also there was a series of increases in the minimum wage, roughly 21% increase in the minimum wage, so their cost structure went up and their revenues went down. So this was an attempt to, again, form a partnership and preserve the economic vitality of the gaming industry in the center. So just quickly here to show you the 2018 hasn't necessarily been an improvement over 2017. In fact, it's been a significant decrease. So through September of 2018, the card room gross revenues were roughly $15 million, and that compares to a little over 18.1 last year. So down 17% year to date. You can see the 2018 revenue is just about $1 million, $900,000 higher than 2015. So still not a significant decline when you go back a few years, but definitely a significant decline over the last couple of years. And that's coupled with an increase in their labor costs associated with the increase in the minimum wage. Similar to, the agreement has a tax structure that's similar to what you approved in January. It's a sliding scale. So the first $400,000 per month of gross revenue is taxed at 5%, and you can see that goes up to 15% on any revenue that exceeds $1.3 million. The report that Dustin shared with you earlier showed that the effective tax rate in October was about 6.8%. It should be about that 6.5% overall for the year. And again, that relates back to a flat 10% tax rate that was effective in the city up until January of this year. A couple things that the agreement does not include that were included in the 2018 agreement. It doesn't provide a 3-month period where the tax rate is 5% up to $800,000. So that provision was primarily put in for construction of the roundabout. So that is not included, and then there's not included a early closure penalty. So if you recall in the January the agreement you approved in January for 2018, there was a ramp down penalty if they were to close by a certain date. That actually would go to zero. It went to zero in November, and so that provision is not included in the 2019 agreement. The budget you just adopted assumed a $1.3 million of revenue, which is the same amount in 2018. If you look at it on a gross monthly revenue basis, we're looking at about $800,000 per month of gross revenue to be able to achieve that with the sliding scale tax rate. As we've been talking about, there is a deficit proposed in the general fund. So continuing this agreement, if you were not to continue this agreement, the tax rate would automatically go back to 10% and would result in additional revenue. Continuing this agreement suggests that supports the deficit of $428,000. And again, those reserve balances are referenced here, $6.2 million at the end of 2018, or roughly $1.5 million more than the policy target of 4.7 million. Staff's recommendation is that you approve the alternative tax agreements with both MT&M Gaming and the Palace Inc.
Oh, I don't see a sunset in this. Is this just, are we now saying this is the new normal?
No, this is an annual agreement, so it's
Okay, I
just
didn't
for
see, I didn't, yeah,
2019.
okay.
Yep,
It is an annual agreement.
yep. Let's see if there's a... Yeah, for, expires December 31st, 2019.
Okay, thank you. I didn't read that part.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the brief that you did. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Very good. Thank you, Paul. Any discussion, council?
No, I think we have to do this to keep the health of our card rooms. I mean, they can't increase the menu price on games. If you make the odds bad, people don't come, so that's self-defeating. One thing Paul mentioned, the 2018 revenues versus 2014 was only a slight increase in revenue, but their internal costs were a lot lower in 2014.
20% increase in labor costs from that time. 2015 is the reference point.
Yeah, because of the minimum wage plus the new benefits package that rolled in this year, so it isn't just apples and apples there. So, anyway, I think we have to go with this to keep the source of revenue alive. We're going to be in a lot more deep poop if we don't, you know.
Technical term?
Very technical, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the relationship between the city and the card rooms is extremely important. Anything to help them thrive and succeed helps our city tremendously. So.
If there's no other discussion, can I get a motion?
Mayor, I'll move to authorize the mayor to sign alternative tax agreements with MT&M Gaming and the Palace Inc.
It's been moved and seconded to authorize the mayor to sign the alternative tax agreement with MT&M Gaming, and the Palace Inc. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, council. So that's all we have on the agenda for this evening. If I could get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Adios.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So,
Thank you. Thanks for being here this evening, everyone. Thank you for the home that got me through it.
You're welcome.